Well, welcome everyone. I'm Cindy Byerly. I'm the KSSN coordinator at Appleview Elementary. I'm also the district team lead for KSSN here in Sparta. And we are super excited to bring to you the Protect Young Eyes parent presentation. And Michelle is here to give this presentation. She's been doing this for 7 years now. And she is going to talk to you about cyber safety for our kids and having a tech-ready home. So thank you, Michelle. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much to Cinda and your team for inviting me in this evening, and also my teammate Nate, who came in to speak with the students today. So if any of you have students here at Sparta, hopefully they will come home and share some things that they learned today. So for the next about hour and a half, we're going to talk about some of the dangers that our kids can face online. And there can be a lot of them, and it can feel overwhelming, especially since we are more analog parents living in this digital world. We didn't grow up with all of these same technology. But more importantly, we're going to talk about some of the practical tools and strategies that we can start implementing leading here tonight to help our kids learn how to use their technology well. Because it may be tempting to want to go home and just unplug everything and take it away, but we know that that's also not real life, that technology is a part of our life, it's here to stay. And so instead of constantly trying to fight against it, we really just want to learn how to integrate it into our life and our kids' lives in a responsible way. So that's going to be our goal for the time here. So with that being said, hopefully you all were able to grab a note-taking guide in the back. And tonight is about you. Thank you for coming out. I know as busy families, you probably have a lot of demands on your schedule, and instead you chose tonight to make this a priority. So we appreciate that. Hello. And so I want to make sure that you are getting out of tonight what you came for. You've obviously had some motivation for making tonight a priority. So we want to make sure that you're leaving with all of your questions answered and that you have the resources moving forward after tonight. Because we're going to cover a lot of information. Or hopefully we'll answer all of your questions tonight, but tomorrow you may think of something, oh, now I think of this question, or I didn't think of it before. So our big goal is to be that place of resources, so that way you can continue. So we don't want tonight to be just kind of that starting of that conversation within your home and with your family, to see what positive changes you can make within your family. So with that being said, feel free to interrupt me anytime with any questions. If you see anything in the slides up here that you want to take your phone out and take a picture, I know it's ironic because we're probably talking about how we're on our phones too much, and I'm saying take your phones out with this presentation. I'm totally not offended, but I'd love you to take pictures so that way you can maybe share this with family members who aren't here tonight or friends. And you'll see that we are going to build in some time for questions and discussion throughout our time together, as well as afterwards. So I will stay after to answer any personal one-on-one questions as well. But again, I just want this to be about you. So again, feel free to ask questions. Be prepared that I'd love to ask a lot of questions of you and to get involved, because as my teenagers will probably tell you, I'm not that fun to listen to for a straight hour. So I'm going to ask you guys to help out, and I think it's always more effective when you're able to kind of have that discussion with your families and neighbors as well. So does parenting ever feel like this sometimes? Maybe a little bit overwhelming, maybe a little bit of denial, like, oh, I totally have this under control, and maybe we really don't. Especially if we have multiple kids at different ages, and now we're going to sprinkle in some cell phones and social media and technology, and it can feel overwhelming. And as so many people say, we just have so many different things as parents that our parents didn't have to go through, right? It's hard being a parent nowadays, which is totally true. But sometimes it's easy for us to forget that it's even harder being a kid. And so it's really important to always keep that in the forefront of our mind to help understand and have some more empathy for the world that they're living in and navigating through now. So our goal after this hour together tonight is to hopefully these flames will feel a little less high, and you will walk out of here feeling more equipped and empowered than you might be feeling overwhelmed when you start. So a little bit about Protect Young Eyes. We exist because of our research, our education, and our advocacy work. We are here because we want to be this resource for you and your families, because we found that typically there's two big obstacles for parents, and that is one, they don't know where to get the resources, and the second is just the time to look and stay up to date. So we want to provide that for you. That's why on that note-taking guide, you'll see me reference that throughout our night tonight as well. If you look on the note-taking guide, especially on the back page, there's some QR codes So we want you to be able to have those resources after tonight. So a little bit about myself. Yes, I'm part of this awesome, amazing research and advocacy team. But the thing that probably qualifies me most to be here with you are these 4 reasons that I am a parent stumbling through all of this journey of technology, the same as you. I grew up in Kentwood, so I went to East Kentwood. I went to Western. That's where I met my husband. And we live down in Portage, where he is a high school guidance counselor at Vicksburg. We have 4 children. My oldest son is a sophomore at Michigan State, so I always see your shirt right when you come in, and this is my eye now at the state. My daughter is a senior in high school. My son is a freshman, and my youngest one is in 6th grade. So we finally graduated from elementary school after 15 years. So we are in all stages. We still at elementary. We had that were out on their own. So we are in this journey with you of all the different ages and stages of parenting and digital life. So before I go on, that's a little bit about my family. I would love to know a little bit about the families in this room. So just by show of hands, is there anyone that have babies here, ages baby to 4? 1? How about lower elementary, like K through 2, 3 through 5, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and beyond? Awesome. I would say, isn't that great? Like, what other topic other than technology could we have parents here from babies to beyonds that we're all talking about the same thing? So no matter what age or ages you have your hands up for, we're going to cover some of those stages and how you can make it safer at each of those stages for your kids. So this is my daughter, Allie. You just saw her as a senior. Now we're going to go back in time to when she came home one day in kindergarten when she was 5, and she was so excited. She said, "Mom, tomorrow is career day at school. That means we get to dress up like who we want to be." I said, "Okay, who do you think you want to be when you grow up?" She said, "Oh, I know. I want to be a cowgirl when I grow up." I'm like, "Okay, that's super cool. Let's find a costume for you. Let's go to the dress-up bucket, because every mom has a dress-up bucket with just things in it." And I said, "But I'm just standing here at my computer just to get some quick ideas. Let's just look, Let me just type in pictures of cowgirl shirt." Can anybody see where this is going to end? You're probably thinking, how do you think that, right? You work for digital tech and you didn't think of this. Well, I totally did think of it. I typed in pictures of cowgirls, and all the leather and diamond-studded chaps that you could think of popped up on those images right in front of her eyes. Now, I like to consider myself a pretty cautious, sometimes even an over-worrier mom. And in that split second, I was the one exposed her to some of those images. So I like to share it because if it was that easy to happen to me, how easy is it to happen to our kids? And that's typically how that first-time exposure happens. We know that 60% of the first-time exposure happens completely by accident, by those accidental and innocent surges. So had I had some of the protections in my home then that we're going to talk about tonight, a lot of that content wouldn't have even come through and gotten up on the screen. So as we start out, our first question is, are there some positives to technology and social media? And that's potentially true. But we also want to make sure that if we are giving these things to our kids, we want to balance that out and have the protections in place. Because we know that the test of the morality of a society is what it does for its children. And have any of you heard of the new book by Jonathan Haidt called The Anxious Generation? So it's a pretty powerful book now that's really kind of reevaluating our parenting styles and how our kids are growing up in such a different world than we grew up in. And it kind of borders around this that we have overprotected children in the real world where they need a lot of free play and autonomy, while underprotecting them online where they're not developmentally ready for much of what happens to them. So as we think about how can we best parent our kids, brings up one of the questions that we get most often. What's the right age for my child to have a smartphone? And then what's the best age to start social media? So as we think about that as parents, we can also reframe that question a second way and saying, what digital decisions and choices can I make as their parent to help give them that best chance at their childhood? So when we rephrase it like that, we got to think of some different ways that go into it. And we've landed on our position based on live research, a lot of neurology of the brain that we're going to talk about, and speaking to thousands of parents and kids who use technology well. And because of this, we landed on our position that we hope that kids are waiting until high school to get a smartphone, and hopefully at least 16 until social media. Then we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth too. But one of the reasons we decided that is we know that no middle school child is a better version of themselves in any sense because of social media. So we've already talked about how we didn't have cell phones and social media when we were teens, right? So by show of hands, who here is disappointed that we didn't have it growing up? Okay, so I didn't see any hands. I heard some snickers and some smiles. Any idea? I mean, I've probably asked this to thousands of parents. Any idea, guesses of how many hands I've ever gotten up? 0. Not one parent have ever said, I wish I had all of this when I was a kid. So what I'm going to ask you first to do is to just take a minute, maybe turn to your neighbors, someone you came with, maybe you'll meet your new best friend that's here, and just give a few reasons why. Why are you happy that you didn't have this technology growing up? So I'm going to give you just a minute to kind of hash that out, and then I'm going to ask for some ideas.
All right, go ahead.
So I'm thinking about that. I'm a middle schooler, and he does have a smartphone, but not security media. And our primary reason for it is because of sports, because parents aren't out together. And so there's times that practices end each other and things like that, and he feels contact with them. And so I feel like back when we were younger and playing sports, either parents was here or I just feel the world is different than what it was when we were younger. Easier catch, like, was it he was she really goes to Florida? I feel like that's too bad. I have a first grade teacher that is like, yeah. All right, so give you about 34 seconds to wrap it up. Yeah, fucking actually, we're late in studio. Take this on your hands, those like if I could all stream it.
All right, so I'm anxious to hear some of the reasons that you and your group thought of about why you're happy we didn't have it. So just kind of walk down the aisle, and maybe you can just shout out some of the answers that you and your group came up with. Well, this is very cliche, but I was forced to use my imagination, made real friends in person, played outside. It was pretty naive in a lot of ways. No, but that's real life. That's great. Thank you.
We have to self-entertain instead of always having something else there. Should be led to
that power of little free time feeds boredom, and that's where it grows creativity, right? That our kids aren't probably getting that chance to be bored,
And the need to be constantly social, where you see what's going on around you and you weren't invited, and what that does to their self-esteem. There's always comparisons going on. You don't really have to know everything that every kid is doing.
Absolutely. So thank you for sharing. I'm sure there was probably some more even talked about, and only in about 2 minutes time, it was pretty easy to probably drum up quite a few of these ideas and reasons. And that's because we see that value in not having it. So it's also a good time to remember, why is it sometimes we're so quick to give it to our kids? When all of us here agree on all of the benefits of not having it, and we're all thankful as a gift that we didn't have to have it, why is it sometimes that we feel so forced to give it to our kids? Maybe even before we want to, maybe in our heart we want to wait, but we don't want them to feel left out or out of the social lives and not getting invited and friends. So we're going to talk about some of those reasons and why we can hope that we are delaying some of this introduction for our kids. So you may find yourself in one of these 3 categories. You may be in the no or slow category, such as young kids, kids who maybe just don't have their own cell phones. You're introducing technology at slower paces, and that's wonderful. When we go into schools, we will even say, hey, if you don't have a cell phone yet, or maybe your parents are having you have social media, that's a gift from your parents, right? So you may find yourself in those categories, and if you do, wonderful. But it's still important to know how to guard the digital doorways in your home and other things that are going to be exposed to. And you may be in that go category, or maybe you have older kids, maybe they already have cell phones and social media and tech, And it's not too late, right? For that reason, we're really going to focus on some of the relational pieces so we can walk alongside our kids and the tech that we've already given to them, so we can focus on some of the monitoring techniques and that relational piece of talking about with our kids how we can use what we have already given them in a safer way. So our first note of resource that's on your note-taking guidance back is our digital download. So if you're already thinking, okay, how do I keep up with some of this information after today? This is our free newsletter that you can scan. It comes out every few weeks, and it just gives you the up-to-date changes, especially when things like Instagram get updated, where there's a new series on Netflix and something that you should know about that your kids are probably asking about. This is a great way to stay up to date on what we're talking about. And now we're landing on our Tech Ready Home framework. So this is going to be the foundation of everything else we're going to talk about tonight. And what it does is it's going to focus on the 5 key values, because after talking with parents who have had great kids who have used technology well, we found that they do these 5 values persistently and consistently. So we're going to talk about each of these values, and at the end of each value, we're going to break it down into a few tips and strategies that you can do kind of as take-home homework, steps that we can do today. And that's when we'll kind of ask for some questions throughout as well. So the first Tech Ready Home framework that we have, the first value is modeling the right behaviors. This means, do you want your kids to use their technology exactly the same way you do? How often we're on our phones, what we're on our phones for, maybe what we're getting distracted from when we're on our technology. And you may be thinking, I came out here tonight to talk about my kids and about that they're on their phones. And instead, very intentionally, it's not about the kids at all. The most important value that we're starting with is us, and that reflection of what kind of image are we portraying to our kids. And that's really intentional, because we know that our kids are always watching us, right? We're their greatest role model, and we know that as parents. But sometimes we forget that that also includes digital lessons, that they're watching how we use our technology. So the first thing we talk about is screen time. What's that right amount of screen time for young ages? And all of the organizations can agree on a few things, such as no sedentary screen time for babies, less time is always best. And the biggest indicator of how our kids grow up and use their technology is how they watch us use our technology. So when we look at screen time, Common Sense Media did a recent survey showing the amount of screen time for kids at the younger ages and teenagers. And any guesses on what the average screen time is for an 8 to 12-year-old? I'll give you a hint, it's at least an hour. So how many hours a day do you think for 8 to 12-year-olds? Just throw it out, no bad answers.
3, 6.
3, 7, all very close. 5.5 hours a day. And if we're looking at older kids, the 13 to 17-year-olds, it's 8.5 hours on average, right? So there's still a lot that are more than that. Now, does that include time in class or using computers for research or homework? It does. So it's not saying it's all just Fortnite games, but it's still 5.5 to 8.5 hours a day on screens. So it's a lot of time in front of the screen. And then we also say, well, what is the consequence of that? What are some of the implications? And yes, we can talk about some of the physical implications just of eye strain and all of this without getting at activity. But we also want to focus on what it does to the brain development. And there was a study that showed their brain switches tasks every 19 seconds when we're online. And that may sound crazy that we're so quick focused, but think about the way an average teenager maybe uses their technology. So maybe they get on their phone, they check a few posts, they like a few things, they post a picture, they comment, they check some comments, they watch a video. It's not a long video, right? Because we don't have attention span for that. So maybe it's a 15, maybe it's a 30-second video. They're going to do a couple quick chats, a text message here and there. And you can totally see it's true, right? We're not sitting down for long, focused amounts of time. It's every average 19 seconds, we're switching tasks. And when you think about little kids, younger kids, using their video games, it's not like the Pac-Man and the Wario video games that we have, right? It's all action-packed and fast and instant gratification. So what do you think happens when kids are used to this fast-paced social media and video games? What happens when we take them off of that and put them in a classroom or just in a social setting? What do we see out of that? Any of my teachers in the room can probably answer that. They can't focus, right? They're bored. The real world doesn't move that fast. I'm not as exciting as a video game. And so we've seen that true, that as screen time increases, the ability of kids to focus and concentrate decreases. So when you're figuring out with your family, hey, what's our expectation for screen time? Keep that in mind of the importance of how much time we're placing on screens. And another study kind of just gave it a new way to look at how to figure out your screen time, which really changed the way our family looked at it. So I've always liked to share it. And it's instead of trying to focus on just a perfect number and the negative, because sometimes it's really easy to feel overwhelmed, right? Like if you do well, you get more screen time, or if you're punished, you take it away. And it really focuses on that number. And instead, we try to look at it as our family and the positives first. So by that, I mean, what's important? What do we want to accomplish every night? And we may say, as a family, I want us to try to eat dinner together every night. I want my kids to have time to play outside, and I want them to have some time to read. And if we accomplish all those three things, and then my child wants to jump on a quick video game, then maybe it's okay because we got all of the important things done, and now this is extra that's just filling in. So however you look at screen time with your family, just decide on those expectations, knowing some of the outcomes of having too much screen time. Our late friend Colin Kirchner said, showing your kids you love them is 2% effort and 98% putting down your thumb. We also know that some of the developmental and language delays are being likened to the parents' usage of technology because of the distraction that we have. And there's studies, especially done with babies, and that when the face-to-face is disturbed by having a screen in front of them, that the babies show physical distress from not having that face-to-face connection. And so we see that now with kids, by us parents, still maybe awesome parents, but just it's so easy for us to get distracted, right? And we're kind of half looking at our email and half talking to our kids. So this is that good self-reflection time. I know when I even really looked at this, my husband and I realized we were definitely guilty of that too, because how easy it is to half do our phones and half pay attention to our kids. And so we want to make sure that we're modeling that behavior that we want our kids to follow, especially when we're in front of our kids. So as we wrap up this first value, here are a couple of those practical tips. So the first one is post with permission. This means we all have cute kids that we love to brag on. We probably love to share their cute pictures and their funny stories. But it's important for us, one, to not overshare and overpost about our kids, and also to do it with their consent. So even the youngest of kids, ask them before you post something. So even my youngest son, if I take a picture and I want to put it on Facebook, I'll ask. And if he says, no, don't put that on, then I don't put it on. Because we want to teach our kids the importance of consent, especially as our kids get older in those middle school and teen years. One of the big issues is the sending of inappropriate nude pictures and posting about other people. And all of that is done without consent. So we want to teach them from these very early ages how important it is to get digital consent before we're posting something. Another thing for us to remember as parents is not to overpost. So let me ask you this. If you were to open up your Facebook in late August or early September, what are you going to see? Back to school. Back to school, right? All these cute little kids holding that little Hobby Lobby chalkboard saying, hey, this is my name. This is my teacher's name. This is my school. Look behind me. Here's my bus. Now you see my bus number. This is the team name of my Little League team. These are all my favorite things. Wow. Look how much information I just put out there about my kids. But we could probably all agree that our friends on Facebook and our contacts are not all the same friends that we would physically give all that information to. So as parents, we need to make sure that we're not overposting for their safety and also their privacy. Because by the time kids are 2 years old, 90% of them already have a digital footprint. And obviously they had no say what was being posted about them. So all these cute, embarrassing pictures that we may think are adorable out there, they may not appreciate having at the start of that digital footprint. So it's a good reminder for us, and also to even share with family members and grandparents about overposting, because I get that question a lot too. When maybe it's other family members or friends are posting pictures of my kids and stories. So it's just important to be mindful of what and why we're posting about our kids. Our second tip is do tech together. And this just means that not all technology is a bad thing, and we want to show our kids that there's some good positive usage for tech. It's not just take your video game in your room and play by yourself, but let's play some video games together. Let's do tech responsibly together. And also we're going to talk about sharing passcodes and devices. So we always encourage monitoring devices, not spying. And there's a big difference, right? Monitoring is done with the kids knowing that up front. Hey, this isn't your phone, this is mom and dad's phone, and we're letting you use it. And that means anytime I should be able to pick up your phone and know your passcode. because there shouldn't be any digital secrets in there, right? If there's something on your phone that you don't want us to see, that's probably your first indicator that it shouldn't be on your phone. And since I'm talking about modeling the right behavior, you can probably see where this is going. We're going to say we could flip that and say, at any point in time, my kids should be able to pick up my phone and type in my passcode and look at anything on my phone. Now, I know there are some exceptions, especially right now. I'm guilty of this during Christmas time. I like to take pictures of toys in stores, and I don't want the kids going through my photo rolls to see some ideas. So there are some practical things like that we totally understand. But for the most part, we just want to teach our kids that phones are not a place where any of us should be keeping any digital secrets. The next one, number 3, is announce your intentions. We hear many things from kids, hey, my mom and dad see that I'm on my phone all the time, but they're always on their phones, so they see that. And yes, there's a lot of reasons why we probably are on our technology. And so it's just important to tell our kids that. Like, hey, I need to send this email, I need to put this grocery order in, I need to set up this conference with your teacher, and then I'm going to get right back to you. So it shows that there's a purpose for it, and then they are the most important things in the room that we're getting our attention back to. And it also helps prevent us from just mindless scrolling and some time wasting. We'll be held accountable a little bit. And then number 4 just means when you're talking to your kids, make sure they're that friendly focus. We're not getting distracted by the technology. Put the focus on them so they know that they're being heard. And then number 5 is create something such as a media plan. When there's in your note-taking guide, there's a template to reference for this as well. And this just means kind of like setting up a contract, a list of expectations with your family. And the important part here is getting your kids involved and asking for their ideas. Say, what do you think some of the rules should be? And what should be the rules that you want to see from mom and dad? And so maybe we're going to talk about each member of the family, especially the littles and the bigs. Okay, what devices can each of you be on? Where do you have the devices? How late can you be on? Who can you be talking to? Set the expectations at the very front, so that way they know that there's no, aha, I'm trying to catch you doing something wrong. But hey, these are the expectations that we talked about ahead of the time. Some families have also used something like this text storage box, where maybe they say, all right, every night at dinner time, or maybe at 8 p.m., all devices are powered off and stowed away so they're not distractions. So whatever it is that your family comes up with, just put that plan in place, because you know your family best and you know what could work. So just try to bring that family focus back, and that way not feeling overwhelmed by screen time. All right, before we jump on to number 2, does anybody have any questions or comments about that first value or anything with modeling that right behavior? No? All right, we went through that perfectly then. So we're just going to keep going on to number 2. So number 2 is pursuing authentic connection. And this really focuses on building that relationship with our kids. Because who here thinks that you are smarter than your kids with technology? Despite show of hands. Anyone? So this, I have got a few hands. I will say the first time somebody raised their hand, I was a little like dumbfounded. I was like, I don't really know how to go on, because nobody's ever said that they're smarter than their kids. It was like 10 talks in, and I finally got a hand, and I was like, okay, I don't get it. How are you smarter than your kid? They said, well, my kid's a baby. I said, oh, okay, so just enjoy it now. It's not probably going to last very long. And of course, I do get some awesome parents who are really tech savvy. And so they say, I do think I'm smarter than my kids. So that's wonderful. But we also know that that's probably not going to last too long, because as they get older, they've grown up with this, right? We haven't. So it's important for us to remember, if our kids really want to find out a way to outsmart us and do something online, they're going to figure it out, right? Just as with anything, if somebody has bad intention and wants to find a way to do something, it's possible they tend to have to. Our whole goal is we don't want our kids to feel like they have to outsmart us. We want to lay this foundation of relationship and the talking about why we do these certain things and why we have these rules, so they don't feel the need to be super digital ninjas and work around some of the parental controls that we have in place. So our goal is to build this bridge of digital trust with our kids. And we do this by small changes in our parenting, such as basing our reactions when something happens. So let's say we are telling our kids what to do online, right? What happens when they see something online? And hopefully, if you have a chance to talk to your kids, if you haven't already, even the littlest ones, right? When we say, hey, what did Nate talk about today? What are you supposed to do if it's going to happen? And we say when, not if, because it will happen. They'll be exposed to something online. So what happens when, okay, hey, Mom, I saw this on the iPad. What if I got that mom reaction? You saw what? Okay, we're taking away the iPad. We're not going to get on this. We're taking away. And Mom just freaked out. right? So how likely are they going to be to tell me the second time something happens? I can guarantee they're probably not going to be super excited to run in and say, hey, guess what? Well, this happened again. Give me another lecture, right? So we have to make sure that we are changing that reaction so they're not afraid to tell us when something happens. And hopefully you've had a lot of these conversations with your kids, so continue adding them, that they know no matter what happens, what they tell us, what they see online, when anything happens, we want them to come and tell us, and that we are that safe place to land, that we're not going to go into the judgment and the lecture, that they can always land safely and softly with us. So we want to make sure our kids know that. So then we talk about, okay, what are we reacting to when they tell us they see some content online? It's not us against our kids. And we're going to talk about the neurology of the brain a little bit too. We're going to talk about how it's easy to click on things and get led down that rabbit hole of algorithms, and then why their brain can't compete with what they're seeing online. So when we're talking about explicit content, this is our next kind of stopping point, where I'm going to ask you to buddy up with your neighbors again here and write a number down on your notepad as to what do you think is the right age to start having these conversations about pornography with your kids. So at what age do you think your kids should be when you start having these conversations? So I'll give you another minute or two. Write that down if you want to share with your neighbors, and then we'll talk about your ages and how you feel about the ages that you got.
I just, Jonesy? I don't know. To that.
I think upon that, now we're talking about it, we have all Spanish kids has price for it through the children's advocacy center. That's all I know that. And I'm a first grade teacher. And so we bring you to Spain and I'm impressed to you and we to look about how, if it were to show you as a gap, as you share, you go tell the dad, don't like the licks, right? Even word pornography or anything explicit. But it starts that conversation. So like they go, it's sort of, no, that's your house. They put it right.
So this wasn't one question to like.
Yeah, so then I think the older they get, then things naturally come forward. But I think just relates to how that is that be trying to ratio. So when you have something, it's in the to the second appeal, it should so on some stick is outside. Got it. I understand no body else. Yeah, it's like waiting you're about to get married. Very to tell your boy it's trusting.
Work for shipping it. So I wrote it and I said, yeah, and we wrote 3 years later. You still
All right, I'll give you about 30 seconds to finish up, and hopefully you have a number written down. I won't even ask what your number is, so you don't have to worry about me wandering around, see cover your shoulder, look at numbers.
I was busy my whole just
Hotel.
ties what age.
So what's
So other.
right? Give us listeners.
Was our what they all was it? Yeah.
All right, does everybody have a number? So I'm not going to ask what your number is, but I am going to ask, how do you feel about your number?
Yeah.
Heard a giggle. Shocking. Shocking because it's so old?
No, no, because it needs to start younger than what we want to as parents.
You're exactly right. We always say no matter what age it is that you wrote down, your kids are probably ready to have that talk before we are. And if we wait until we're ready, it may already be too late. Any other feelings about the number that you guys had? Feel overwhelming? That it's young? Does anybody wish that your age was older? Like you think in your heart, that's probably the right age, but I wish it was older. So if you're not loving the age that you wrote down, you're probably definitely not going to love what I'm going to ask you to do next. But I'm going to say cross your number out. I'm sure it was a really good number, but cross it out and subtract 2. And that's probably closer to the age that you should have these conversations. And before you think, okay, that's absolutely crazy, that's way too young, I'm not going to listen anymore because it doesn't make any sense. So before you think that, as you may be thinking in your head, that's totally fine. But let me give you an example of what I mean. So when my kids were young, my boys were young and they were on the iPad watching a video, I just paused them and I said, hey boys, when you guys are ever watching a video, do you ever see anything on there that makes you feel uncomfortable? No, Mom. Do you ever see anything that makes you feel scared or just kind of weird? No. Do you ever see anything where people should have clothes on, but they don't? No. Okay, well, when you see that, it's not your fault. Just put it down and come tell me your dad, okay? Okay. So let me ask, was that a long conversation? Was it awkward? Was it anything like the talk that we were thinking about when we were kids, right? Like, oh my gosh, I have to sit down with mom and dad and not even to look at you. We're just going to pretend like this never happened and talk about it again. It wasn't long. It wasn't awkward. You think it created a whole lot of questions and curiosity? How many times did I say the word pornography in that example? None, right? But let's talk about what I did. So I told my kids exactly what to look for. What did I say? Anything that makes you feel uncomfortable, scared, weird, naked people. So they know exactly what to look for, right? And I told them the very first thing I said, if that happens, it's not your fault. So hopefully they heard that right away. So they know what to look for. They know when it happens, it's not my fault. And I gave them 2 things to do. What do I tell them to do when they see it? Put it down and tell someone, tell mom or dad. So my kids know what to look for and they know exactly what to do. That's a porno good talk. So now maybe does that young number, especially when I said make it younger, maybe not seem quite so crazy or overwhelming. So now you can see even with the youngest ages, it's not creating this weird curiosity. It's not having these big awkward conversations. That's not what we want. We don't want this big drawn out conversation. We want these small little check-ins. And it has to be more frequent than the one-time talk that we had. Because every time they get on a device, they have that chance to exposure. The average age of the first exposure for pornography now is 12 years old. And we know it's about 60-40, where 60% of the time is accidental, 40% is that curious exposure. And then we see the consequences, especially of that early exposure to pornography, where the recent study said over 1/3 of the kids said that they thought pornography was an accurate depiction of love and relationships. And that's definitely not what we want to have happen, right? And also said that over half of the kids admitted that by watching porn, they thought it gave good, helpful advice. Again, not what we want to have our kids having be this role model for. So it's so important for us to have those conversations early at those young ages. We set the goal to try to have at least 10 of those conversations by the time the kids are 10 years old. And if your kids are over 10, it's not too late. It just means start having those now and continue to have those little constant check-ins. Make it more of that normal conversation. It sounds weird, right? Make porn the norm in your house. Normally we say that. People like chuckle and kind of giggle. Like, that sounds really weird. But what we're saying is just have it a little bit of that normal conversation. So that way the kids don't feel awkward telling us when something happens. So this is our founder, Chris McKenna. He's just going to pop in for a couple of these short videos to kind of go over that value.
At Protecting Us, one of the things that we say is 10 before 10, like 10 porn talks before a kid turns 10. Now, sometimes parents freeze or freak when they hear this, but you'd be surprised what qualifies for a porn talk. Friends, I like drips through their lives. I don't want a PowerPoint with research. I don't want you to drown them in porn talk. I want it during car time, meal time, together time, or bedtime, car time. You're going down the road. How do you ever see anything that makes you uncomfortable? Making people on the internet, that's how pornography. You can tell me I'm safe. That's a porn talk. You could be in the kitchen stirring food. They don't even have to be looking at you. Guys, if you ever see anything that makes you uncomfortable, that little funny feeling in your belly, if you ever see it, you'll never freak me out. You'll never be in trouble by telling me. Friends, that's a porn talk. You're talking a minute, just say, honey, have you ever saw anything uncomfortable? Something that bothers you on the screen that Chrome could tell that even while doing homework. Listen for the response. That's a porn talk. Friends, if they're not rolling their eyes, you're not doing it enough. 10 before 10, that's a porn talk.
All right, so we're looking at our practical tips for this value. The first one is be curious, not condemning. So especially when kids are telling us that something happens, make sure we're starting with that posture of openness, of curiosity, that leads to conversation, not condemnation or going into that lecture. Again, we want our kids to know that we are that safe place and we want to practice. So if we're telling our kids, just like the little say, hey, put it down and tell someone, have them practice putting on the iPads, come telling us, give them a list of someone. Hey, who is it that you can talk to about this when you see it? So really have them know what to do when it happens. And the third is make sure your kids know that we want to be that default search engine. Hey, if you have questions, come ask me. Because if they're not asking us, it doesn't mean that they're not curious for finding the answers, right? Where are they finding the answers instead? Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube. And we can probably all agree that the answers they're finding there are not the same answers that we would give them. And they're definitely not given in the same loving way that we would explain things to them. So make sure our kids know that we're that open, safe place for them to ask questions. Any questions on that second value before we jump into number 3? All right, so the third value is encourage work and play. And this again comes out of that Anxious Generation book where we see that shift in parenting and how that's affecting our kids. So this is our friend Melissa Griffin, and she runs an organization called HR Mom. So after being an HR executive for 20 years, she found that a lot of the new hires just didn't have a lot of the same skills to thrive anymore. A lot of maybe what you and I might consider some of those fake sick skills. And so she did now is she's educating parents on how to really create some of that responsibility again in our kids through that value and hard work ethic of chores and responsibility and work as a family. So we talk about the benefit of having the kids feel that satisfaction from a job well done and being a participating, important member of the family. And so that means when we give kids our responsibilities, we also, as a parent, have to be okay with the outcome, such as, hey, if I ask you to load the dishwasher and it looks like that, the mom in me really wants to just redo it, right? Because it's not the way I would do it. But if we're asking our kids to do something and then we're redoing it, it takes away all the confidence and the point of it, right? So our objective is to give our kids these small responsibilities. Let them do it like this. Let them mow the grass, even if the lines are crooked and it's driving us nuts. And then we say, next time, maybe we can improve it a little bit like this. So it builds their self-esteem and their work ethic. It sounds so basic, right? But again, if you talk maybe to teachers and professionals now with kids in these ages, a lot of them just don't have these fundamentals anymore. So it's important for us as parents to encourage that. And the second part of their work is the play. Again, from Jonathan Haidt's book, where he wants to focus on kids waiting until high school for smartphones. He wants at least 18 for social media. He's advocating for phone-free schools. And the fourth one is getting back to this play-based focus. Because when we look at kids now, their freedom to play and explore has declined, and the mental health has declined. So we see some of that correlation. We also know that kids just aren't outside as much, right? So many parents will say, before you used to drive through a neighborhood, you'd see kids out there playing and pick up game of basketball. When we drive or ride our bikes around the neighborhood, when did we usually have to be home by? I'm scared. When the street lights come on, right? We all know that was our thing. You just don't see kids out and about doing that anymore. And this comes from the World Economic Forum last year, where it said 74% of tweens spend less than an average of like 1 hour outside a day. And that's less time outside than our prisoners get of outside recreational time. So it's pretty eye-opening when we see the changes and the differences in how we grew up. And I think we said that at the very beginning, right? The time for the imagination and to be bored and creative and social, and just having that play time, right? We've learned so many things. How does this impact us? It impacts us by the way we parent and how we sometimes have these bubble-wrapped, overprotective kids, right? Because none of us want to see our kids struggle, but kind of what our generation has done too is try to completely pave the way instead of teaching our kids how to pick themselves up after some of these stumbles in the real world and in the digital world. And we also know that as busy parents, sometimes it's easier, no judgment, right? It's easier to give them a cell phone or a Mickey Mouse so we can get through the shopping aisles. But what happens when we're constantly relying on that is that their brains, again, we'll talk about neurology, actually learn to kind of crave that. And then if you give them the choice of getting that downtime and that bored time that leads to creativity, or, hey, let me jump on an iPad where it's right there, instant gratification, our brains are learning to always pick that electronic device over the playtime. And it's not just for our kids. If we were kids and hadn't been given that choice, we would have chosen the same thing. So it's important for us to understand this and, again, increase our empathy when we see how difficult it is for our kids to make that choice of having the tech. So what can we do about this for our practical tips? The first one is visit that HR mom, learn a little bit more again about that work and play culture. And then the second is make time for our kids outside. Different organizations, things that you can look at based on the ages of your kids. But whatever it is, work that into your family expectations. Maybe if you're making that media plan again about screen time or family priorities, work that outside again in nature time in. So before we jump into the value number 4, any questions? All right. Next one is to delay all addictive technology. So if you ever said, I wish I would have given my kids Snapchat earlier. No, I've never heard that from anybody else. Yeah, we haven't either, right? We always hear the opposite. But we don't ever typically hear, I wish I would have given my kids earlier. So we're really going to focus on getting the right kid, the right tech at the right time. It's not no tech, right? It's the slow tech and delaying when it's age appropriate for them. And when we talk about how do we know when it's age appropriate, we really have to think about and learn a little bit more about the neurology of developing lighting. Because our kids and their brains are not just tiny adults. Their brains are unique. And we know this, especially as children are little and they're developing. We know that it's the time when their brain is developing the most rapidly it ever will. That's why we say things like, 5,000 books or words before kindergarten to really go ahead and enhance those language skills. And the reason we do that is because when kids are little, their brains are what we call neuroplasticity. That means they're molding and they're shapeable, and they actually form new neurons and synapses is based on what they're doing and learning. So for as complex as the brain is, it really boils down to a pretty simple concept. And that is our brain learns to crave what we feed it most. So if it's constant, fast-paced technology, that's what our brains are rewiring it to. That's why we see when we take off that they get bored. So it's unfortunate that during this time of this rapidly developing brain also happens to be the same time that we're usually introducing most of the technology. When we think of the brain, we can also think of it in three parts because we know that it develops from back to front. So the first part that you look at is that reptilian part of the brain. This answers that question, am I safe? This is the regulatory part of the brain where it controls things without us really realizing it. We're not sitting here thinking our heart rates to start beating, it just keeps going. That's the easy part of the brain. Then it jumps up to the limbic system. And this is the part of the brain that answers the question, am I loved? This is based on the emotional part of the brain. And this is where the teenage brain lives because it's not quite up to the neocortex, which we'll talk about, but instead it's based here. It lives on these emotions and arousal and fear and stress and anxiety. And this is the part of the brain that social media plays on. Because as social media and apps, what is the full goal of social media? They want to make more money by getting us to spend more time on it, right? How do they get us to spend more time on the app? They play off that emotional part. They play off the part that they know is addictive and the neurochemicals that we use because of it. And it's not just teenagers, it's us too, right? Think about that pull. And let's think about a teenager and how an average girl uses Instagram. So maybe they take a picture, it's probably not the first picture, right? Because they're probably going to take 10 until they get the first picture, the best one. Then they're going to post it, then they're going to wait. Do I have any comments yet? What are people saying? Oh, how many likes do I have? I didn't get as many likes as her. Okay, I'm going to post another picture. Now I'm going to wait. Oh, now I'm going to check the comments. You can already see it's a little stressful, right? It's based on that stress. So that's where the teenage brain lives because it's not quite up to that neocortex. That's that prefrontal cortex where we know that that's not developed until our kids are in their 20s. So that's the part of the brain that's responsible for impulse control and good judgment and decision making. So that's why if you're around a teenager, I always like to say teenage boys because I have two of them, and you look at them and say, what were you thinking? Chances are they probably weren't. And it's not always their fault. It's just their brain isn't ready for it yet. You know, if we see a big rock on a cliff, I think, oh my goodness, be careful, you could fall. And my boy's like, cool, something to jump off of, right? And later he's like, why can't you think of all the terrible things that can go wrong? It's because their brain doesn't have that capability yet. So when we know this, how can we be surprised when we're giving them technology when we know their brain isn't developed and then they make the mistake and then we're surprised about it, right? So it's important for us to realize that their brain isn't ready. And again, you think about the algorithms and how strong they are. So think about maybe you might be shopping or just looking at something online. Then you leave and then you come back and wow, look at the ads on the side of the computer. It's all like the same thing that I was looking at. It's magic, right? Well, it's not magic. It's an algorithm. It sees where you're clicking, where you're just pausing and hovering, and then it gives you something, right? It's smart. It knows how to draw our attention in. And that's what it's doing to our kids, too. And the pull of that, especially with these underdeveloped brains, is so strong that that's why we say they're not always responsible. It's not always their fault when they're looking at things like that online. So now when we understand the brain and how it's not quite fully developed yet, that's really why we land on that delay. That's why we say we hope that kids are waiting until high school and at least 16 until social media. And we also know that age is just a number, right? That some kids are maybe more mature or ready before 16 and some are not ready after 16. It's not like, boom, I'm 16, now I'm ready for this. So we also like to introduce a few social cues. So if you're deciding if your child is ready for a smartphone or social media, we want to ask a few questions in addition to their age. And the first one we like to ask is, can your child be left alone at home for 2 hours? Because if they're not responsible enough for that, they're probably not responsible enough to have a phone in their pocket where they can completely change the whole trajectory of their life with one click or send. The second is, can your child introduce themselves? And it may sound so simple, right? But can they smile, shake your hand, tell you their name, and use just those basic social skills? Because we know when they get online, I think we mentioned it, just the social interaction is so much different, right? I mean, sometimes my daughter will text me and be like, Allie, I don't even know what this is. There's not even a vowel in it. What is this supposed to be saying, right? They lose some of that. You know, you watch kids, they don't even know how to write a letter, or you don't write dear someone with a comma. Like, all of that is foreign because that's not the way they interact. So make sure they know the social interactions before they go online. And the third is, if you ask your child, hey, can you tell me 3 awesome things about yourself? And that may sound strange, but the goal is we want our kids to be confident in their value, in their identity, and their worth before we put them online, where we know there's a lot of people that will be very quick to jump on there and try to tell them what their value and identity of worth is. So we want it to be really grounded in that before they enter social media. So remember some of these social cues in addition to just a hard, fast page, but that's why we've landed on that. So again, here is Chris with talking about the first tip of interrupting your kid.
I love interrupting my kids. How rude, right? But when it comes to their technology, I love to interrupt them. I want to do that so I can check whether or not they're hooked on their stuff. And they've known for a very long time that whenever dad asks you to put something down, that's when you do it. And then all the reward from that is that most of the time when they want to play something, video game, whatever it is, most of the time the answer is yes, if they've proven that they're not hooked on it. That looks like this. A few weeks back, Blake was right in the middle of a Super Smash Brothers game, which is like a 3-minute match on the Switch. I was in the kitchen. I said, Blake, dude, I need you to pause the game, and I need you to come and help me empty the dishwasher. And you know what he did? He paused it, and he put it down. And I said, Blake, good job. That's exactly what I was hoping you would do. Now, as a reward, you don't need to help me. I'm going to do it. He was like, awesome. Go ahead and keep playing. Because through training, he knows that if he listens to when dad needs him to put it down, whether it's to help or just because I think they've had too much time, if they listen to that, then they know that most of the time when they want to play something, the answer to that question is yes, because they've proven to me that the game doesn't control them. And they also know the consequence from that. If they get mad when I take it away, whatever they're playing is gone for at least a day. I want my sons to figure out how to manage themselves and their neurological responses when it comes to screens. Interrupt your kids.
If we ever wonder if social media is addictive, one of the new research studies that came out that asked teenagers who have some of those top apps, such as Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, how often they check them. Over a third of the kids responded to checking them at least hourly, and 80% said they check it almost constantly. So you can definitely see the pull. And again, we're talking about teenagers, but it's kind of the same for us, right? We can probably easily see how invested and sometimes maybe feeling addicted to our screens and checking social media. So it's just to put that in perspective. And Chris made a great point, which is one of the questions I get asked very often is, maybe I gave my kid a lot of this technology and I see the pull and I think they're addicted to it. They spend way too much time, but how do I backtrack, right? How do I take away some of that screen time? And that's what we say. Give them that transition, kind of that transition time or that heads up of warning of how long they get on it. And then, okay, it's time to put it down. And if they throw a fit, that's kind of that first indicator. And we can tell our kids, hey, we got a really big response to that. That's probably showing us that this screen and this video game is becoming too powerful for you. So we're going to walk that back. And maybe if you throw a fit like this, then we're just going to take it away for a day. And then we'll try it again the next day. And if it's the same response, we may take it away. Or then we build it up again so that way you can have access to it again when you show us that it's not that powerful for you. So great tips for how we try to walk that backwards for our kids who may be getting a lot of that pull. So interrupting your kid is number one. Number two on your note-taking guide is just changing this mindset of brain against the game. And what that means is us understanding why our kids may be reacting so hard to when we try and take away technology. And to not take it personal. It's not thought of as much as me fighting against my kid, but instead removing ourselves a little bit and saying, now I really understand the pull of that video game to them because that's exactly how that game was engineered, right? It was engineered to attract their time, their underdeveloped brain. So it's my kid's brain against the software, and that it's not always just me fighting against the kid. Just that little shift in how we approach that makes it different. And number 3 is even if you have said no, teach your kids as if you said yes. So that means going back to that early slide of maybe you're in that no or slow category, or say maybe my kid doesn't have a phone or social media. It doesn't mean we still can't have these conversations and put the controls in place, because we know that we can't control all of the digital doorways. So we need to teach them in those age-appropriate ways of what to do when they encounter something online. All right, and our 5th value is to diligently prevent harm. So this is where we kind of get a little bit more into the tech side of what can we do, what safety measures can we put in our place in our home so we don't get that Cowgirl Alley story of pictures accidentally coming in. So when we're trying to protect our kids, we really have to think of multiple layers of protection, because unfortunately there's not just one easy button that we can toggle on and nothing gets through and they're safe, right? So we're going to show the different layers and how sometimes we have to fall back on some because some are not completely foolproof. So the first side of that is laying that foundation of relationships. So the good news is this is what we talked about, especially through those first couple of values, right? Modeling that right behavior, looking at screen time, showing the pursuing that authentic connection, just with building those relationships, being curious, being open, leading the conversations, being the role model with them. All of that lays that foundation of relationship. And that's important because, like we said, if kids want to find a way around it, they can. And this is that part that we focus on. We're not trying to have you outsmart us. These are the reasons that we're going to do things like keep our Wi-Fi better. So when we go up to that level of Wi-Fi, we talk about how do we protect our homes. And a lot of it boils down to this one device in your home that's probably the most important device. It's probably the most misunderstood. And if you have questions about it, you're definitely not alone, because it can be very confusing. But this is a great QR code on the back of your note-taking guide where we explain, what is a router? Is it different than my modem? Do I have one? Do I have both? Can I upgrade it? What does it do? So basically, you think of a router in your home as if you have more than one device, everything comes in through the router, kind of like the hub. And then it routes the internet, the Wi-Fi signal to all of the devices that you have. So if you can help control that router and what goes out, you can make all the devices in your home safer. And the most important feature about the router is it has that filtering software. So when we say that, that means it can block the junk. So had I had that Griffin router in my home, when I typed in pictures of cowgirls, that filter would have stopped those websites and content from appearing on the screen. And so we know that's important also because 27% of the internet that's unfiltered, so it means it doesn't go through a router first, is explicit. So it may not sound like a crazy number, but think of it like this example. So if you have a living room and your child walks in and you have a coffee table and there are 4 magazines on it, 3 magazines are fine and 1 is explicit. That's 25%, right? So how confident are you every time your child walks in that room that they're not going to pick up that 1 magazine? Because those are the same odds that we're using if we give our kids a device that it doesn't have a router and filtering on it. So it's important to have that filtering content. And then there's also other parental controls in addition to that. So for instance, it pairs to your phone and you can control the Wi-Fi in your home. You can control it for different profiles, different devices. So if I picked up my phone right now, I could turn off the Wi-Fi off in my home in Kalamazoo, because that screen time limits. I get notified if there's a new device in my home. So that's great. So we know that kids are bringing in, as they call maybe burner phones that we don't know about that they're using on their signals. Also great for when our kids have friends over, because when they bring up their devices into our home and connect to our Wi-Fi, now all of their searches go through our Griffin router. So it makes it safer for what they're searching, and also prevents them from downloading, for instance, a VPN that then would circumnavigate around our Griffin router. So a lot of features that the router can do to protect the Wi-Fi signal in your home. Now, here's the bad news. I said there's always kind of loopholes, right? What if you're in your home and you just get off of your Wi-Fi and use data? Then it doesn't go through your router anymore. So now it's not protected. That's why, again, it goes back down to that relationship part of it, where it's okay, son or daughter, I know you can just get on your data and go around it, but these are the reasons why we're golden you don't. And it can be, again, that small shift in just how you present it to your kids. It's not how we're getting this Griffin router because I think they're looking at terrible stuff and this is to block it from you. Instead, it's, hey, we're putting this router in because there's a lot of junk on the internet that's not good for you and it's not good for mom and dad. So none of us just need to see it. So it's going to help all of us. Just those little shifts helps, again, build that bridge of digital trust. And it's not a me versus you, I think you're doing terrible things on it. It's let's protect it because there's a lot of awful things out there for all of us. So I encourage you to read that blog post about routers and see what kind of router you have, what protections are on it, and maybe what you need to upgrade to keep your Wi-Fi safer. And also see, there's 3 levels of the router, and that's just based on the size of your home and the number of devices in your home. So now we look at, okay, I've made my home safer, right? I'm using my device on my Wi-Fi. But what happens if I take my phone out of my phone and now it's not on my Wi-Fi? How can I make that actual device safer? So a couple of options. First, we're going to talk about hardware options. And this is especially great if you have a kid who wants a phone and thinks they're old enough for a phone, but you may be thinking, I don't want you to have a phone just yet and everything it comes with. Is there something in between no phone and full-blown smartphone? There is. There's a few options. I like to call them kind of like phones with training wheels because there's things such as Gab or Bark. So for Gabs, then you could have the option where it looks like a smartwatch or a smartphone, and it has GPS, so you can have some of that responsibility of maybe your kid can ride their bike and you still know where they are. And it has the ability to talk and text. So again, they can go to a friend's house or you're able to communicate. Some of the reasons that we may want to give them a phone, but there's no access to the internet or the app store. So all it is a GPS, talk, and text. Then there's another option, the Bark phone. Now this does have access to the internet, but it has the Bark software woven in that we're going to talk about in a second. And it has parental controls that can be deleted. So both great options, just with some different benefits. There's also pinwheel trimming, other options as well. So again, I think on your note-taking guide, you can read about some of those alternatives instead of just jumping into a full-fledged smart. So a lot of great things, especially for those younger ages where it would be nice to be able to get a hold of phones, but we don't want to give them all of that yet. And now we're looking, that was hardware. Now we look at the software part. So we say, what can I put on my phone or device to make it even safer? So there are a few subscription-based ones that we can put on. One is Covenant, and this is especially great for older kids and teens, the adults, because it's an accountability software for pornography. So that way they get an accountability partner where they're watching what they're seeing online. Another software that we really recommend is Bark. And just like we talked about the Bark phone, this is the Bark software, and it's really good, especially for kids who are just starting out, maybe having phone or social media, because what it does is it monitors everything that they're doing online through social media, social media chatting, and texting and email. And what it is, it's kind of like that second set of eyes. Because we said, but we should always monitor our kids, right, and what they're doing online. But we know it's not physically possible for us to look at every single text message and email that they're sending, right? Really, nor should we, because that's still part of that responsibility rule, right? So we want to monitor, check in, and then give some time for them to use it responsibly, monitor, check in. So we're not catching absolutely everything you're saying. So instead, Bark is. It's that second set of eyes because it is watching everything that they're doing, and it has an algorithm built in so it can pull out something if they see it's potentially dangerous. So if there's something on there that's being written about bullying or sexting or nudity or depression or suicide, then it'll ping that on our phone and say, hey, in your son's Bark, this conversation was happening. So that way it's kind of that gives you that chance then to intervene. So think of it as that second set of eyes. And then you'll see the Apple Screen Time and the Kite is for Android. These are parental controls that are just native to your phones. So if you have these devices, there's parental controls on there. They're not necessarily easy to set, and they may take a lot of steps, but you can set them to make your phone safer. And if you have Apple and Family Time and Screen Time, the biggest recommendation we always have, one of them that we especially use in our family, is to disable the App Store. so your kids don't have access to just download something from the App Store. And it's important because it just pairs to your phone. If they want something on the App Store, we just get an alert like, hey, Allie wants this app, yes or no. Because we want to still be able to control what apps they're using. Especially, you've probably heard so many times of kids hiding apps that look, maybe it looks like a calculator, but that's where they can hide explicit pictures, or hiding apps within other apps. And so if we disable the App Store, they're not able to download those apps without us knowing it first. So really look and see what controls you have on your phones and then how you can make them safer. And so this is our website. And if you look, you can look on there and look up by devices, any and all devices that you have in your home. And it'll show you step-by-step directions on how to set the parental controls on all of the devices that you have. So we're trying to make each device safer for them. And then we look at location, because we know that where we use our technology impacts how we use it. So there's some places where we just tend to not make good digital decisions, and we hope that technology is not being used in some of these places. And that's the bedroom and bathroom. Again, we just want tech to be in public places, because then kids know that mom and dad are looking to see what they're looking at, what websites they're on. And again, thinking about older kids and the sending of nude pictures that is so common now, then this takes away that chance of doing things behind closed doors. Buses, that can be a hard one to police if they're allowed on buses. But going back to that, hey, what age should we have those talks? Because think about if you have a 5-year-old kindergartner who's riding buses with older kids who are allowed to have phones on the bus. I mean, like 50 kids and one bus driver, what could go wrong, right? That's just a lot of chance for some exposure. So, and something I like to throw in here too, if your kids do have phones, turn off the ability to airdrop or to receive airdrops, because that's a big issue. A lot of times it happens on buses. It happened to me when I was in my middle school gym watching my kids' basketball game, and somebody in the gym dropped a naughty picture and it landed even on my phone. So turn off that airdrop, so that way your kids can't just be around a group and get explicit pictures sent to them. So a lot of places just to be mindful of. And you see grandparents' houses. This is not meaning that they shouldn't have tech at grandparents' houses. It just means that oftentimes kids know that with many things, there's a lot of different great rules at grandma's parents' houses. I was used to laugh, when my grandma and grandpa took care of my kids, it was like Oreos for dinner. I'm like, grandparents' house is the best, right? It's just different rules. But also, typically, they may not have routers or the same protections in place. So kids maybe know that they can maybe get away with more or do different things at those. So just being mindful, the power of place. We also know bedroom, boredom, and darkness. We call that the toxic trio, because no matter what age it is, we just don't make good decisions. Not even just explicit to pornography and looking at sites, but even like late night Amazon purchases. The next day, like, why did I buy that? I just shouldn't be looking at things online. I just don't make good choices. And then finally, we look at the app level. So if our kids are on apps, it's important that we know a little bit about them. So we know, one, if they should be on that app, and if they are, is there any way that we can make that app safer? If we don't know anything about it, then we don't even know how to make it safer. So this is where we're going to have a little aptitude test, I like to call it. So there are 9 logos on here. So I want everyone to look at those and just raise your hand with the number of fingers that you can identify. So if you can identify a logo, put your fingers up for the number that we can identify. So anywhere between 1 and 9. I like to give a little participation trophy, so be real. Everybody should have at least one finger up, because even if you don't know anything about it yet, you know the name of thing. Right, anybody like two-hand yet? Let's see, a couple two-handers. All right, so we're going to go through some of these. So that way, hopefully, you'll leave with more fingers up, like, now I know what it is. And I can guarantee if our kids were in the room, they'd probably be double fingering it, right? They would have a lot more. So we are going to start with this one. What is this for? Minecraft. So this is a super popular game, right? And they build little things. Anybody have any idea what the average age of the average Minecraft user is?
In school is
8, 10, or 10, 11. Those are totally what I would have guessed, but it's 24. That sounds crazy, right? But Minecraft existed 12 years ago. So you think about it, was probably a 12-year-old kid that started playing with it, and now they're still on it. So the average user of Minecraft is 24 years old. The thing to look at there is if our kids are using Minecraft, this is now not just a space for kids, right? You have adults that are using this. So now we have kids and adults sharing the same space. So when that happens, it's automatically more inherently dangerous, right? What about this one? This is my participation trophy. It's called Be Real. Can anybody tell me anything about it? Yeah, Sarah.
An alarm either was off, and you just take a picture of whatever you're doing, and then that's posted and it's shared with on your people. Like that's the game, is like whatever it is that you're doing, you just take a picture.
You're exactly right. It's like the raw version of Instagram. So exactly what Sarah said. At any point in time in 24 hours, your alarm goes off. It's time to be real. So if you've ever been around a group of teenagers and you hear them say, it's time to be real, what you do is they take a picture with the front camera and the back camera. So chances are you could have even been in someone's Be Real in the back camera without knowing it. And then they post it. It's, hey, this is what I'm doing right now. But here's one of the things with Be Real. It was the most popular app a couple of summers ago for teenagers. But something to be mindful of is anytime during that 24 hours, your Be Real goes off, right? And I think you get 2 or 3 minutes to post, right? Now you can miss the 2 or 3 minutes and post late, but then you're labeled as a late poster. So that's super uncool, right? So think about, okay, I have this in my pocket. Anytime, any minute goes off, I have to stop what I do. I only have 3 minutes, no matter what I'm doing. Like, it's stressful, right? We think, why would you want to engage in that? But again, going back to that limbic system of the teenage brain, that's what it bases. Okay, I need to stop everything. This is the most important thing. I can't be late. So being mindful again and being a little sympathetic of how their immature brain works against these strong algorithms. And all right, what about this one? Kind of tricky one. We might know what this said. Twitch. Yes, thank you. Can you tell me? I think you're one of the first parents who's gotten it. Can you tell me anything about it?
It's like where you can go and watch people like live stream video games, or even I don't think I have so necessarily video games, but I'm really sure.
You're exactly right. You can watch people streaming talking about sports or politics or gaming. Yes, thank you. And typically it's for older kids and teens. That's typically the users that we see on it. So again, just that chance for interaction and content, and what they're streaming, that's the content. What about this one? This is another tricky one.
Discord.
Discord, thank you. Can you tell me anything about Discord?
It's like a chat service where you set up servers with private groups of people.
Absolutely. So it's what we like to say, it's probably the most popular social media that most parents have never heard about. It's a full-blown social media platform. But the average, it's actually rated as an app that was 17 plus. So it's mostly teens and older kids and adults, a lot of adults on Discord, and therefore a lot of explicit content. So if your kids are on Discord, just be really mindful and supervising the content that they're seeing. All right, we're going to get to a couple more that are a little more popular that we'll probably know about. What about this guy? Amusing Bill. TikTok. Anything worry you about TikTok? I'm waiting for the one word I always hear. Everything. It's usually everything. Everything worries me about TikTok. So obviously there's a lot of the privacy concerns, the challenges, right? And especially in school that are trying to influence kids to do dangerous and destructive challenges. And it does have the most addictive algorithm of any social media. All right, what about this one? The video game that's blocked, it's Roblox. So if your kids probably know about Roblox, it's actually not really just a game. It's more like 40 million games within Roblox in different worlds that they can enter. But there's one feature on Roblox that makes it dangerous. And people always ask me, what's the safest game or most dangerous game? And it's really about looking at the features. So any idea what feature is on Roblox that makes it dangerous? The chat feature. Exactly, because if you give your kids an app with a chat feature, you're giving them a direct line of communication with anybody in the world, right? And we can't control what other people are sending to them. So that's the bad news with Roblox. But the good news is, in this case, you can actually disable the chat. So it only takes about 3 toggle switches and you can turn it off. So now if your kid's on Roblox, you've made it safer. But again, you have to know about that first, and then you know that you can turn it off to make it safer. All right, what about this one that looks like a camera? It's Instagram. Yeah, so Instagram, we talk about the FOMO and the whispers of Instagram and the comparison, especially with kids and teens and young girls. Then we also talk about the breeding ground for predatory activity, because a lot of times people will reach out and connect at Instagram and say, let's move the conversation over to, who is my friend here with the ghost? Snapchat. Because what happens to messages on Snapchat? so they disappear. Well, we've already said we should monitor what our kids are saying, but it makes it pretty hard because they're disappearing, right? And also, if I'm going to send something that I know is going to disappear, it might just make me more likely to send something that we otherwise wouldn't, right? Anything else with Snapchat that worries you? Yeah, it's
Location feature.
location. Can you tell me about it?
If you don't actively go in and turn it off, anyone can look up your account and see exactly where you are within to the room of the house.
Exactly. And can you imagine, like, again, it's one of those, why would you want that on, right? But if you've ever been around a group of teenagers, because I have, where everybody was there except one, and like, where's so-and-so? And they all get out Snap Map. They say, yeah, she is right here. And as a parent, we're probably thinking, why would you keep that on, right? How unsafe is that? And why would you want people knowing? But you're right. The good news is you can turn it off. You can put it in ghost mode. But as a parent, can I go in my daughter's Snapchat account and turn that off and lock it in? No. If they want to turn it on, they just toggle it back on. There's no password protection. So again, going back to that levels of protection, that's where we fall back on that relationship side and we have the conversation of why it's not a good idea to share your location. So please keep that turned off if you're going to have Snapchat. So thank you. Yeah, Snap Map, all the explicit content that's on Snapchat, and Snap Streaks. Nate may have even talked about it today with the older kids as well. But with Snapchat, if I send you something and you send me something back, that's a snap. And the streaks happen every day, consecutive day that we have those snaps going. So I kind of liken it to little kids, you know, when you throw a ball back and forth and you count how many times, but then if you drop it, you have to start all over. That's what a snap streak is. And it's so addictive because we have seen kids and typically we ask, you know, what's your snap streak? And we've seen kids who have snap streaks in the thousands. So that means no matter what's going on in their life for years, every single day, they have thought, I need to continue this snap streak with this person. And then we've also asked, okay, have any of you ever gotten in trouble and gotten your phone taken away? Well, almost all the hands, right? Because it's usually the easiest form of punishment. And then we ask, have any of you ever had your phone taken away and had one of your friends log into your account to keep your snap streaks going? And so many hands are found. We've even heard of kids being kind of entrepreneurial where they'll charge money to go in and keep someone's snap streak because kids just are so worried about losing that snap. Again, as parents, we're like, really, why would you do this, right? And seriously, why would you give someone access to your account who's going to post something that you're responsible for? But prefrontal cortex, they're not thinking all of that true. So many things to talk to your kids about if they're on these apps. And also, even if they're not, because even if your kids are here and don't have Snapchat and I show them that ghost, probably all of them could probably tell you what it is, right? Even if they don't have it, it's easy to get access to all that. All right, and the last app here to learn a little bit more about is, what's this guy? YouTube. Would you be surprised if I said that there's over 96,000 videos uploaded every minute on YouTube? It's not. I just lied, and I shouldn't lie, but I like the drama. See, just like, oh, really? What is it? It's every second. 96,000 videos every second are uploaded to YouTube. So first I think, how are we getting anything in the world done when there's 96,000 videos uploaded? But the second is there's not enough manpower in the world to monitor everything that's uploaded. And we know that, right? We've heard of all the horrible things that are live streamed and put on YouTube and all the content, even if it gets taken down, what have we seen in the meantime? So with YouTube, we always recommend with supervision. So no kid should be on YouTube without supervision just because of all the content that pops up. And another thing we talk about with the apps is the ads that are on it. So maybe you say, my kids are on YouTube and what they're watching is okay, but it's the ads that pop in. And why is that? It's because the ads, do not need to follow what the app is. So what I mean by that is, back when we could only watch cartoons on Saturday morning, what type of commercials were on then? Kids commercial, cereal, right? Toys. If it was a kid's show, it had a kid advertising. And so you would like to think if my kid's playing on a kid app, it would be kid ads. But it's not. It doesn't have to match up. It's not regulated anyway. So we've heard a lot of instances of my kid was on a kid app, a Crossy Road or something, and then there's a pornographic ad on it because there's no regulation. So another bit of advice we give is whenever you download an app, you can usually get a free version or pay a few dollars and get the ad-free version. So if you can, pay the ad-free version so you remove the explicit ads that often come in. So one other tidbit of this, for the apps is the app rating. And I kind of mentioned it with Discord. But let's say your kids want to watch a movie and you've never heard of it before. What's the first thing you do to see if it's appropriate? check the rating, right? Is it G, PG, PG-13? And most of the time, it's pretty accurate. So if your kid is asking you for an app, so you may think, I'm going to check the rating, right? So to give you a little bit of app history here, COPA, which is the Child's Online Privacy and Protection Act, in 1999 made it a federal law that no app or software developer could collect personal information from anyone under this specific age. And that's what social media does, right? It collects your information. So this legal law actually says that no one under this age is allowed to have social media. Any guesses on what that age is? 13. Yes, so it says no one under the age of 13 should have social media. Federal law. So now if we're going to look at what the app rating is for the most popular apps, such as TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube, what do you think the age rating is? Kind of using that little tidbit that I just gave you for free. What do you think that app rating is? 13. That would totally make sense. Well, you know it's not true, right? And then if I say it's going to make sense, it's not going to make sense. It's 12. That totally doesn't make sense if we just said it's a legal law that you have to be 13, but yet the most popular apps are rated at 12 plus. Why? Because they can, because they're not regulated. There's no laws or restrictions against that. It's just whatever the developer puts on the age. A year ago, YouTube was rated at 17 plus. And then over Christmas time, it just changed to 12 plus. It was some of our followers who actually noticed it first. There was no big announcement. There was nothing that changed. They just changed their age rating because they can. And the problem was that it messed up parental controls because now all of a sudden parents had it set where anything above this age rating couldn't get through. So they lowered it. So now it gets in. So all of this to say we can't trust the app ratings. At one point, TikTok was rated at 4 plus. So we know that's not no accurate, right? So we say this because don't just blindly trust the app ratings. Instead, look on our website again. It's a great place. It has over 100 apps that are reviewed on there. So it'll show you what are some of the positive things about the apps, what are some of the dangers, what are some of the features that you can fix, like roadblocks, turning that chat feature off, what the age rating says it is, and then what we recommend that it should be. So hopefully, again, you've turned off that chat feature, or disabled the app feature from your kids so they can't get an app without you knowing. If they say, hey, mom and dad, I want this app, we can look at the website. And then what we're going to talk about is our 7-day rule where you can decide then if it's going to be appropriate. So what we say the 7-day rule is download the app as if you were your kid. So if they want an app, put it on your phone first. But the important thing is put in their age and their birthday so the app treats it like it's our kid playing it. Why? Because we want to see what levels of the game is it going to introduce, what ads are going to come on thinking it's my 12-year-old son. And then play it for 7 days because the levels and the ads change after a week. And then after you've played it as if they would for a week, then you can decide if it's more appropriate for your kid. And there wasn't enough things to worry about. There's a few new things that you probably heard about in the news to really take mind of with our kids, some of the dangers. And the first one is deep fakes. And this is using that deep AI to intentionally create hoaxes using videos and images that look like somebody, but is not. So again, talking to our kids about that, not always believing those aren't the real actors that we know. Also the new software called Nudify, which is actually quite a growing problem, especially in schools, of kids using it against their peers. What it is it takes a real picture of someone, and this software takes the clothes off them and it makes it look like it's their naked body. So they're sending nude pictures of someone. It's not actually the person, but it looks like it because it's their face in their picture. So this is becoming really increasingly popular that we're sharing about with the software. Now, the unfortunate is there's nothing that parents we can block or do about it. So again, it's just talking to our kids about that. And also going back to that fee, remember how much we're posting and the pictures we're putting online out there of our kids, maybe be mindful of what we're posting too. And then sextortion, if you've probably heard about this in the news. What this is this where someone starts a relationship online and they encourage someone to send the new picture. And when they do, they say, oh, surprise, I wasn't that hot girl that you thought I was. And instead now I have this new picture of you and give me money, or I'm going to send this to all of the contacts that I have from all your social media accounts. So it's holding these kids' pictures ransom, and that it ends in a lot of terrible stories where kids are feeling shameful and not wanting to tell parents. It leads to suicide. So again, always having that conversation. Hey, no matter what happens, I'm that safe place to land. Talk to me. Don't worry about these. So a lot of things to talk to our kids about. And so what are the tips that we can do? That 7-day rule that we talked about with checking the apps first, and then knowing that the devices that they have are led by parents.
From a very young age, I want our kids to know that every internet-connected device is called phones. That means when they're little kids, you don't buy them their devices. We buy devices that we let them use. For your twin son or daughter, maybe you get them a Hot Pink Amazon Kindle. You name the Kindle Dad's and Lauren's Kindle so that she knows there's nothing to hide. Technology is a we activity and not just a me activity. When your son or daughter is ready for a smartphone, aren't I an amazingly kind, benevolent parent that I'm letting you use this device while you're here in the house? And even if you decided to pay for it yourself, whenever we have something that powerful here in the house, we're going to figure out together how I can still be involved. Because whether you go at 4, 14, or 40, one-on-one with the internet, we eventually all lose. And trust me, that conversation with your teen son and daughter is a whole lot easier if you plant the seed early. We do tech together.
So that wraps up our 5 key values. And again, we know as parents that takes a lot of work and ethic and effort to really be involved in monitoring and learning about the apps that are on. But we also see the consequences, what happens if we're not involved. So we know that it's an important job that we have. And again, to remember that, yes, parenting is hard, but it's even harder being a kid now. So keeping that empathy up for our kids while we're working and coaching them on how to help use their technology safely. So that was a lot of information that we covered. So sometimes I know it's easy to feel overwhelmed and where am I going to start? I don't even know where to start, so I'm not going to do anything. So we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to boil it down to kind of, hey, let's look at 3 big things when you leave today. The first thing, again, kind of that piece of homework, is to go home and see what kind of router you have in your home, because that's that most protection that you can have on your Wi-Fi. So maybe you have a router, you know how it works, great. Maybe you have a router, you don't know how it works, just look up and see what controls are on it. If they can work, great. If it's something that you just need to set to approve and they work, great. If it doesn't have all the kernel control features on it that you're looking for, maybe you upgrade to something like that Frictum router. The second one is hopefully you've had and continue having those conversations with your kids about being the safe place, especially now when you see things like the sextortion and all of the terrible things. Like to say, you know, have some conversations, especially with your older kids, about all the horrible things that we're afraid that can happen. So that way they're aware of it and they know what to do if any of those things happen, that you're that safe place that they can talk to about it. And then 3 is the table. This is just another resource after today. As we mentioned at the beginning, that digital download, that's that free newsletter. Well, this is our membership community. So you can join with like-minded parents, have access to deep dive webinars and training seminars, and get one-on-one tech help with Chris and our tech team. So again, it's all on our website and it's in your note-taking guide as well. So we have a few different options, as well as reaching out to us to see where we're active on social media, which we know is ironic because there's a lot of things we don't know about social media, but we try to use it in some good ways. So you can continue to follow us and get all of the resources that we offer. So at any point in time, and again, please encourage you to check out the website where you can find all of the screenshots and step-by-step directions on protecting at the app level and the device level. And if you have ever any questions about the tech setup in your home or anything such as that, you can always reach out to us through the website. All of those questions land directly in my inbox, so we will always get back to you. So we just really want to be here for you, kind of as that outreach and that place for you to go to help get some of those questions answered. So before I turn it back over for our thank yous and closings, I just want to say thank you again. Thanks for participating so much and all of the interaction and for coming out and again, encourage you to talk with your kids about what they may have heard today from day in school. So I will pass it over to the member who would like to say any closing remarks here from the team, and thank you again.
Thank you, Michelle. So thank you for coming out today. Appreciate your participation. If you have kids, they are on the playground playing tag, so you can pick them up outside, and everybody have a wonderful evening and be safe.
Can I just say real quick, the time I'm on the side, my oldest is 26. I've been coming to your seminars for probably 15 years, and hands down, your website is by far one of the best resources that's out there. And I hope that the parents in this room realize it and get to know it. And I hope they share it. I hope that more of this information gets out to our district. I'm so thankful for you guys for sponsoring a parent event like this. You could say it every year, but there's never on Mars Party trying to parents will wake up and realize what's happening online with them kids. Hope and see you big.
Well said. And this was recorded, and we will be sharing this to all the families in the district, the recording. So if you talk to your friends and neighbors and other families, part of families, let them know that they will have an opportunity to look at this recording.
And thank you. And I'm going to stick around here too. So if anyone wants to ask any one-on-one questions, I'll be happy to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.